It's rare to watch a congressional hearing where the invited guest is methodically and consistently caught lying. I promise it will be a very interesting spectacle of lies, deceit, and omission with one specific goal: to prepare the case for submission to the Department of Justice to initiate legal proceedings. Gentlemen, this is very interesting. Step by step, move by move. And you see how the fly twitches, struggles, and is gently pressured from all sides until it confesses. Watch until the end. I promise it will be really funny. And at the end, I promise a conclusion that I myself came to just recently. Some kind of, I don't even know, insight, conclusion, understanding that suddenly appeared. So I really hope that we will go through this together. This is a wonderful interrogation video with my commentary, of course. I'll be showing you clips and commenting, and then we'll discuss the conclusion that came to my mind. We were waiting for this day. We waited exactly a year. We hoped that this moment would come someday. And now look at the face of the person being interrogated. This is the face of the enemy, no doubt about it, a lost sheep. This is the face of the enemy, the face of one of the most despicable people in American jurisprudence, in American politics, and maybe even in American life. This is an outright careerist, scoundrel, liar, whatever you want to call him. His name is Jack Smith. For those who don't know, he's the one whom Obama and Merrick Garland tasked with putting Trump in jail by any means necessary. Any means. I wasn't mistaken when I said Obama. I know that supposedly Biden was president at that time, but the order to destroy Trump was given to Jack Smith by Barack Obama. When I say ha, I don't mean anything by it. I mean the middle name, patronymic, or whatever they call it over there. Formally, of course, he was appointed by the United States Attorney General Merrick Garland, but the appointment was done in such a cunning way, it's pure fantasy. Honestly, you can just go crazy from them. I mean, he appointed him in such a sneaky way that later he could say, I appointed him? No, I didn't appoint him. I didn't even have the authority to do that. It was Congress that was supposed to appoint him to this position. I just delegated it. And then he somehow started doing something on his own. Smith actually did all his illegal business himself. Merrick Garland has nothing to do with it. He wasn't here, didn't sit, stand, or lie down. So how is Merrick involved? And will your turn come too? They just started with this. So the day has come. A powerful celebration has come to our street. Absolutely unappointed prosecutor Jack Smith. Well, not exactly unappointed, it's just that there's a certain procedure that no one followed. He knew this perfectly well, but we were presented with everything you are talking about. He does whatever he wants, he did whatever he wanted, whatever his masters wanted, that's what he did. A liar, a scoundrel, a filthy bastard, a creature. At the interrogation, at the hearings in Congress, this is the very first step, but it's a step in the right direction toward bringing charges and going to trial. The time has come for him to wet his own pants, not those people he interrogated, pressured, and so on. How many times in court before this did people say, how can you use such methods? But they kept calling him back and calling him back and calling him back because he used any methods. But I don't know, maybe he didn't torture, or maybe he did. God knows, confident that he would be protected. No longer sure, he did whatever he wanted. On Obama's orders, he was turning our country into a madhouse, into a banana republic. I don't mean anything about Obama being black, God forbid. That's not why I said madhouse or called it a banana republic. I want you to first listen to the introduction to the hearings. This is a hearing in Congress. This is Jim Jordan, who is well known, I think, to most of you. He's probably one of the sharpest lawyers in Congress. He's a lawyer by education, but he's never actually worked as a lawyer. Jim IA. By the way, he is a two-time American champion in freestyle wrestling, so he used to wrestle before, but he doesn't anymore. When he was in Congress, he was elected from the state of Ohio and became a friend and ally of Trump. In that year, he quickly joined him, seeing in Trump the embodiment probably of his dream to return America to the values and morals of past years. Not everything was perfect in the past years, but there were some things that need to be restored. So Jim Jordan, the chairman of the committee, is now the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in Congress. The opening of the hearings on prosecutor Jack Smith's case. So the person responsible or the accused, yes, probably not yet responsible, the one accused of crimes against the Republic.
And to get President Trump, they were ready to do anything. Since January 7, 2023, Kevin McCarthy has become the Speaker of the House of Representatives. 16 days later, Jack Smith issues a subpoena for his phone records. Phone records from 2 years ago, covering a 2-month period from Election Day 2020 to January 7, 2021. Jack Smith and Biden's Department of Justice obtained the call data of the leading Republican, the second most important person after the president. They know who he called, who called him, when, and how long the call lasted. You can track a person's life. They know who the speaker talked to before major votes, who he talked to after major votes, when he calls his colleagues, when he calls his family, and on top of that, they go to a judge with a non-disclosure subpoena for American Telephone &T. Do not inform your client. The Speaker of the House, you just handed over his phone calls to Jack Smith and Joe Biden. And that's the whole point. They tell the court, we need this non-disclosure order because there's a risk of him fleeing. Someone might influence witnesses or evidence. Are you kidding me? The Speaker of the House is going to run away? They got my phone records for 2.5 years. Even the Democrats said that's wrong, but of course we shouldn't be surprised. The Democrats have been persecuting President Trump for 10 years, a whole decade, and the country should never, ever forget what they've done. In the next few hours, we're going to hear, I suppose, a lot of yelling and screaming from that side, but we should never forget what happened, what they did to the man we, the people, elected president twice. It began in 2016 when they were spying on his election campaign and headquarters. Clinton hired Perkins Coie, which then hired Fusion Global Positioning System. And they hired the foreigner Christopher Steele to fabricate a fake dossier. That document was full of garbage, but the FBI used it. We all know Jim Comey. He was the very guy who, literally last year while walking on the beach, said that God himself made the waves wash up shells that formed the number 89. And this guy took that dossier to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court, lied to the court, and then spied on another country's election campaign. This led to the Mueller investigation. 2.5 years, 19 lawyers, 40 agents, $30 million, and they found nothing. Nothing at all. No collusion, no conspiracy, absolutely no coordination. Then came impeachment 1, sparked by an anonymous whistleblower. We didn't even know who was accusing the man they wanted to remove, the man we elected and they're trying to oust. We couldn't know. Secret hearings in a bunker in the basement of the Capitol. Once again, nothing worked out. And then there was the second impeachment. No secret hearings here because there weren't any. It was a quick impeachment. And the trial in the Senate actually took place after President Trump was already out of office. Then there was Alvin Bragg, who said before being elected district attorney that there was no case. Then he gets elected, and he changes his mind when the left starts pressuring him to go after President Trump. He hires Michael Colangelo, a former advisor to the Democratic National Committee and the third-ranking official at the Department of Justice. And then, of course, there's Fani Willis and Nathan Wade in Fulton County, Georgia. We questioned Wade, the most interesting deposition I've ever been to. We told him, you billed Georgia taxpayers thousands of dollars for a meeting in Washington with the January 6th committee and the Biden administration. And we asked him, who did you talk to, Mr. Wade? He couldn't remember.
Jim also talks about other shady characters. Let's call them that. Yes, well, nobody. from our fellow villagers who use Russian and Ukrainian on the internet, those who supposedly support the Democrats, none of them will tell you about how they messed up today. Smith messed up, how he dodged, how he lied, how he looked away, how he rolled his eyes and nervously shuffled his feet on the floor. They won't show you anything. They'll just tell you things like this so they don't have to show anything. They'll just talk and throw dirt, hoping something will stick.
Putin, there are some
levers,
ways to influence Trump we don't yet know.
We don't know, but I'm saying this because I really love money.
Well, Trump, he's a poodle. He's definitely an agent.
No, you're the agent, and that's not a guess.
Trump can't openly work with Moscow yet.
He can't yet. And you, punk, how do you know, you empty-headed fool? But let's move from these creative scarecrows to more serious enemies who work for serious money, not for pennies. This shusher.
We asked where you met. Was it in the Capitol, the White House, or elsewhere? He couldn't remember that. We asked if these meetings were in person or over the phone, and if you had a Zoom meeting. She just couldn't remember. In the end, we simply asked him if he actually came to Washington and met with people. He said, yes, of course I came. Not at the taxpayers' expense, I know I came. He has no idea who he talked to or what he did. And then there was the raid on President Trump's house, where they searched Barron's room and the First Lady's wardrobe. During our testimony with Stephen D'Antuona, the head of the FBI's Washington field office, he told us that none of the usual procedures, none of the usual protocols were followed during the investigation. Usually you run this out of the Miami office. No, we're going to run this out of District of Columbia. He said he recommended it, and the FBI agents. The Washington field office advised notifying the president before the search. Or at least when they arrive there before starting the search, call the president's lawyers, ask them to come and meet with them and conduct the search together. Once more, the Maine Department of Justice responded negatively. Which brings us back to Mr. Smith on November 18, 2022, 3 days after President Trump announced that he was running for president. Attorney General Garland appoints Jack Smith as special counsel. One of the first things Mr. Smith does is include in his team the very people who are responsible for the search of President Trump's home. Those same people. Jack Smith also added team members who obtained phone records of dozens of Congress members. People like Thomas Windom. When we took his deposition, took a FIP 71 times, we actually referred his case to the Department of Justice for obstructing our investigation. Jack Smith then gets a gag order in his investigation against President Trump from Judge Chutkan without filing a single written statement from a witness or potential witness about them feeling threatened by the president's statements. Stop and think about that. Jack Smith is restricting the speeches of the former president who is a candidate for president. Thank God Mr. Smith's decision was overturned on appeal and the order changed just 2 weeks ago. The Washington Post said Jack Smith would have dealt a devastating blow to the First Amendment. I just want to read 2 sentences from this. Mr. Smith didn't seem concerned about interfering in the democratic process by trying to silence a candidate for high office. 3 appellate judges, all appointed by Democratic presidents, ruled that Mr. Smith's proposed gag order violated President Trump's First Amendment rights.
Do you understand that the Democrats tried to use a court decision to prevent Trump from speaking to voters during the election? And so a judge prepared by the Justice Department issued such an order. 3 judges from the Court of Appeals, all Democrats, all of them, were shocked and unanimously overturned this unprecedented act for America. If a presidential candidate starts speaking to voters and mentions anything about the trial, he must be immediately arrested and put in jail. That's what the judge means. His buddy, Smith, I don't know, not exactly a buddy, but his own relative, put in jail. If, during his speech to voters, he mentions anything from the court, and the court is about everything, meaning basically anything, he comes out to the voters and it slips out, "My name is Tramp," possibly taken from court materials. And these people demand that we play fair because that's what morality and the Constitution require.
And this is not the first time Smith has lost in court over the secret documents case in Miami. Judge Kennan ruled that Smith is not allowed to be a special prosecutor. Jack Smith was never properly appointed. In fact, he could not have been properly appointed because he was never confirmed by the Senate to any executive branch position as required by law. Here's what Judge Kennan stated, quote, "My position as special prosecutor in fact usurps these important legislative powers, transferring them to the head of the department, and in the process threatening the structural freedom inherent in the separation of powers." And of course, on July 1st, 2024, the United States Supreme Court ruled that President Trump had immunity for actions he took as president. A month after that Supreme Court decision, Jack Smith filed a new indictment on August 27th, 2024. But Mr. Smith doesn't stop there. He does something completely unprecedented. On October 2nd, he files a motion with the court before President Trump's lawyer even responded to the indictment. Everyone knows how it usually goes. The government brings charges, the defense responds with their own motions, and then the government replies to the defense's arguments. But Mr. Smith skips the second step and files a 165-page memorandum, nearly 4 times the court's limit. Even the liberal judge Chud Khan, who granted Jack Smith everything he requested during this investigation, even she called it unusual and irregular. And why did Jack Smith do this? Why would he break procedure? Why would he break the court's rules? Why would he do this? Because he's running out of time. The election is just around the corner. It's going to take place in 33 days. And he needs to get President Trump. He needs to prevent President Trump from running, to drag him into court. He needs to bring the case to trial. Or, at the very least, insert a 165-page political document into the presidential campaign. It was always only about politics. The good news is that the American people have figured it out. They've seen through it. For a long time, the left has controlled so much in this country. The left controls the major media. The left controls the big tech companies. The left controls academia. Hollywood, the Democratic Party, and much of the federal bureaucracy may be influential, but the left doesn't control the people. And despite the left and Jim Comey's attempts to weaponize things, Alvin Bragg, Bonnie Willis, and Jack Smith, we, the people, saw right through all of this, and we elected President Trump twice.
Brilliant speech. Did you see Smith's deliberately bored face? Well, let's keep watching.
I love my country. I love my country and deeply believe in the fundamental principles on which it was founded. And I have no party affiliations. My career has been dedicated to serving our country, upholding the rule of law.
If that were the case, we wouldn't be here at these hearings. There wouldn't be any hearings.
Based on how you handled this investigation, I would take a different approach. The one that sought maximum legal advantages at every step, the one that repeatedly bypassed constitutional limits to such an extent that you had to be constantly restrained throughout the entire process, for example, shortly after you became the special prosecutor. You subpoenaed the Speaker of the House's phone records for 2 months, along with those of other senators and representatives. Even though the Department of Justice's integrity section cited legal risk, what exactly was that legal risk?
Regarding the subpoenas for call details that we issued, they were approved by the Integrity Section, the Public Integrity Section, and when approving these subpoenas, they noted the fact that the subpoenas concerned the records of people who were not subjects of our investigation. But they stated that there was a risk of litigation, and you still proceeded anyway. You also obtained court orders from judges to keep those whose records were seized from finding out.
You didn't even tell the judges you were requesting records of members of Congress? In clear violation of federal law, which states that the telephone service provider for the Senate office should not be prohibited from notifying about a records request. Now, if you tried to do this today, you would get away with it, requesting a gag order from the judges without telling them that these were members of Congress.
These records requests were granted according to the department's policy. That's right.
I want to clarify. Smith not only demanded to wiretap the third-ranking person in the government, the Speaker of Congress, but he also didn't tell the judges He completely forgot that this was a member of Congress, the Speaker. So he forgot to mention it, completely overlooked it, and even requested special permission to keep this wiretap secret after informing the court. Well, as Jim Jordan later said, I think there will be some evidence in this case. That's what the suspect said. If the Speaker of Congress finds out, he'll flee abroad.
And that this policy has changed since then. They changed the policy based on your actions. You also issued a non-disclosure order against President Trump that the District of Columbia Court of Appeals overturned for being too broad. That's correct.
Well, the District of Columbia Court of Appeals, when reviewing that order, found it to be justified. They narrowed the order, but confirmed the occurrence. They narrowed the order because it was too broad.
Did you notice how Zoc is trying to wriggle out of it? No, the judges weren't canceled, they were limited. It kind of reminds me of another pig, that is Bill Clinton, who was questioned in Congress. So, under oath, you stated that you didn't have sex with Monica Lewinsky, the 18-year-old White House intern, and now you're kind of apologizing for having had it. So, well, kind of for what? Clinton said, well, in our state, in Arkansas, oral sex isn't called sex. You didn't ask me if you had oral sex, did you? You asked if you had sex, and I honestly said no, we didn't have sex. If you'd asked if you had oral sex, I'd have said yes. Exactly, great. Well, Smith is just his one and only cousin, and Hillary, of course, is also his sister.
You also requested an early trial date, which the district court denied. When did you submit your indictment memo to Attorney General Garland? Reports say he was unimpressed and raised First Amendment concerns. Mr. Smith, the record shows your decisions were overturned and you were reprimanded from the Department of Justice, Attorney General, Solicitor General, District Court judges, the Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court. My last question, do you think you made mistakes or regret how you handled the investigation?
He was brought in to bite, to lie, to hit Trump, to lie, to break any laws, just to make sure Trump wouldn't get elected, but thank God he couldn't do anything, and now he's gonna lie again.
If I regret anything, it's that I didn't express enough appreciation to my staff, who worked so hard on these investigations. We've followed the facts and the law. These people working for me have sacrificed endlessly and endured too much just doing their jobs. So if anything, I would like to thank them.
Without mistakes. That's humility, Chairman. I yield the floor. Well,
Great idea, Kozul Ivanovich. You couldn't have done better. No, he might be a bulldog, since he was called a bulldog, to latch on to Trump, but with intelligence, with this kind of intelligence, yes, but not really. I mean, he's not very smart. He might be a bulldog, but not a very smart one. Here's a funny story. Zoc and someone on his team came up with the idea that a drunk Trump doesn't hit. By the way, while in the back of the limousine, he lunged forward. Well, he went up to the driver, grabbed the steering wheel, started turning it and yelling at everyone, calling the driver's mother some pretty unprintable names. But he stayed with English and didn't switch to Arabic, Russian, or Mongolian. Well, it doesn't really sound like Trump, honestly, yeah. I mean, sure, he can say a bunch of words easily, but not quite like what they're describing. We've known and followed him for years, so this doesn't really sound like him. So Smith found some woman in the White House who is under oath. I mean, she took an oath, right? Like the one who said, he raped me in a department store 36 years ago, in that very fitting room, and there were a bunch of other women in the neighboring fitting rooms, but I kept quiet so they wouldn't find out. Well, something as absurd as that, so to speak. Yeah, so Smith pulled her out. It's absolute complete nonsense. Not a single court, not a single judge. But Smith released it to the press to smear the presidential candidates right before the election. Now listen.
she was their main witness for the January 6th committee, their main witness at one of those staged and scripted hearings that they had the former president of American Broadcasting Company News organize. She was, in fact, the only witness at that special primetime hearing on Tuesday, June 28th, 2022 at 8 p.m. And she told such stories, well, those were quite some stories. She talked about how the president lunged over the back seat, grabbed the steering wheel, and tried to drive to the Capitol. And I just want to know, do you think she was lying?
Chairman Zordan, my assessment of this particular issue is that regarding the testimony about someone lunging or the president lunging at the driver, my recollection of her testimony on this matter is that this is what it was. According to others, she said she heard it from someone.
Why show on nationwide American television a woman who heard she wasn't there, heard from someone who heard from someone else that supposedly the president was acting out in the car? And he made it up. By the way, this is none other than the former executive producer of American Broadcasting Company who was hired to organize segments that could be shown on television to incriminate Trump. I think they paid plenty.
You know,
The name Tony Ornato is familiar. The name Tony Ornato, yes. Deputy Chief of Operations at the White House, Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations. You remember what he said about this?
I'm not sure right now.
Yes, he said there wasn't. And Bobby Engel, does that name sound familiar to you? Yes, a Secret Service agent who was actually in that car that day. Do you know what he said? He said it didn't happen. Both said it was their first time hearing that story. When Ms. Hutchinson testified at the primetime hearings as a key witness for the January 6th committee, by the way, did you ever confirm her testimony about that particular incident?
We conducted, as I mentioned earlier, our own independent investigation of all aspects of this case that we considered relevant. We, the attorneys from my office,
Did you confirm that? It's a simple question.
we conducted interviews, or rather the attorneys in my office did.
Did you ever confirm that the president jumped over the seat and grabbed the steering wheel? The whole story she told at the January 6th hearing, did you confirm that?
So we interviewed another witness who
was in the car, who did not confirm that this is exactly what happened, but also stated in your testimony to the committee last month, Mr. Smith.
No one had confirmed the story before. But nevertheless, Smith brought this woman to the hearing to show her on television and did not say that she wasn't there. No one present had ever seen or heard anything like that, and none confirm it.
You mentioned last month that much of Miss Hutchinson's testimony was hearsay. Do you recall saying that during the interrogation? I did, and I was referring to this exact topic. You also mentioned that Miss Hutchinson was a second or third-hand witness to this statement. We asked how you'd cross-examine her as the defense attorney if she were on the witness stand. You said that as the defense attorney, if Miss Hutchinson was the witness, you'd first move to exclude her testimony as hearsay. Do you remember saying that? Yes, that's correct, sir. Since you planned to call her as a witness, if it had gone to trial, we hadn't finalized our witness list yet. We had a lot. You were still thinking about her. We had a wide range of witnesses for this case. Do you know what Washington Post reporters Carol Leonig and Aaron Davis wrote in their book? They wrote a 300-page book detailing Justice Department investigations, and on page 310 they said this. Jack Smith wondered whether some of Cassidy Hutchinson's statements could be relied upon in court. Nevertheless, at some point, Smith told the election team that he was not ready to dismiss Hutchinson's testimony. However, Trump administration officials unanimously and categorically refuted her testimony under oath. Prosecutors on your team told Smith they didn't want Hutchinson as a witness, and Smith agreed. Carol Leonig and Aaron Davis, who wrote this, they're lying badly.
When you run your mouth in front of journalists, they end up publishing it, and you have to answer for it. You have to take responsibility for your words.
As far as I remember, I definitely didn't make any final decisions about who we were going to call. And that's the whole point. That's exactly it. The fact that they used her at the primetime hearings, and you don't rule out or didn't rule out using her, putting her on the witness stand.
Did you notice that after the question, Smith pretends to write something down? He came up with that so he could have 2 seconds to think. Usually when you're telling the truth, you don't have to make anything up.
When everyone knows she wasn't telling the truth, that says a lot. That's how far the left and the Democrats were willing to go to get President Trump, putting someone on the witness stand who, as everyone knows, makes everything up. Everyone knows it. And you were ready for that? By the way, do you know how many times Cassidy Hutchinson was mentioned in their report? In the January 6th report? Any idea, Mr. Smith? I won't say. A whole 185 times. A person the whole country knows wasn't telling the truth. And yet you still considered calling her as a witness because you needed to get President Trump. And that's obvious to everyone.
The main thing Jim Jordan is doing, even though it seems like he's just talking and joking around, he's gathering facts to refer the case to the Department of Justice. The Congressional Committee is collecting facts, preparing a report, and submitting it with a recommendation to the Department of Justice. To open a case, the Department of Justice appoints a prosecutor responsible for it. He can assemble such a special jury from any part of America. I've already told you about it. It's called a grand jury, an expanded panel of jurors, and the case is presented to them. There are no lawyers from the side being accused. They simply present the case, explain the suspicions, show the materials, show the facts, both those gathered from Congress and everything already collected by the Department of Justice. And this expanded jury decides whether there is a crime or not, whether it makes sense to start a trial or not, and whether there are enough suspicions or facts. If there are, that doesn't mean guilt. No one is saying anyone's guilty yet. It's a very one-sided process, whether to open a case or not, whether there are reasonable suspicions or not. Yes. So if yes, then the prosecutor gets very broad powers to collect evidence, check phone calls, correspondence, take computers, check phones, and all sorts of things, right? But for that, you have to prove to this grand jury that you have serious suspicions supported by facts or something else.
You understand the Bill of Rights means that a person has the absolute right to believe in anything, whether it's true or not, and to stand up for anything, whether it's true or not. You understand that, aside from your oath to the Constitution, this is one of the things the First Amendment allows, right? Yes, sir. Our case is strong if you know that people have the right to express their opinions, lobby for their interests, stand up for their position, and do everything possible within the law to urge others to make different decisions. Then why did you see criminal behavior from the president who believed he didn't win against Chairman Jordan? And I have something in common just like many others present here. We saw wrongdoing, so on January 6th we voted against certifying election results in 2 states because their selection of electoral ballots violated the United States Constitution. And yet you come here and talk about I was just following the law when you went after these people and said, well, technically I can do this. Didn't you notice selectivity or separation of powers in the Constitution? When surveilling the activities and conversations of the Speaker of the House of Representatives, for what purpose could conversations between the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives be conducted? The President and second in line for the presidency? By what right would this even concern you, unless you believed in the existence of a conspiracy, unless you initially assumed there was a conspiracy? You, as the president's people for Richard Nixon, pursued your political enemies. Maybe they weren't your personal political enemies, but weren't they Joe Biden's political enemies? They were Harris's political enemies. They were the president's enemies, and you were their tool, right? No? Oh, great. So you were spying on the Speaker of the House and those other senators and so on. And you didn't tell anyone, and in fact you imposed a gag order so they couldn't find out unless they were subjects of the conspiracy investigation. Then why is Congress an independent branch of government that you are constitutionally required to respect? Why was no one supposed to be informed about this, including even the judges? When you went to spy on these people, you mentioned that you were spying by requesting records to find out when conversations took place between the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives and the President. Did you inform the judge, or did you hide it? My office wasn't spying on anyone. Wait, The question Mr. Smith asked you was quite straightforward. Did you hide this information from the Article 3 judge? During the process of seizing the Speaker of the House's records, we complied with the case. You hid this information. Mr. Chairman, please let the witness answer. It's not your turn. Return my time. You've done this before. The witness has the right to answer the question, and there will be enough time to answer. Please return my time and let me finish. Mr. Smith, I asked you a question and you didn't answer it, and I want you to answer. Did you conceal it? Do you consider it legal or not, right or not? The name of Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, when documents were requested regarding Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, or Jim Jordan, the chairman of this committee. The gentleman's time has expired. Please return the time taken from me.
No,
Time's up.
we'll let the witness answer since he's important. We didn't give this information to the judge when we requested the non-disclosure order.
You heard how the Democrats got nervous. It's fascinating. It means you hit a sore spot for them. Smith and his team didn't inform the court that they were requesting the right to wiretap senators and the Speaker of Congress, and that seems like another serious violation of the law. They didn't say who these people are. They just submitted last names, like there are just people with those last names, and maybe they submitted 50 more last names so it wouldn't all be together. Someone said, wait, that looks like senators. The judge didn't catch on. There was no such law, but they already pushed it through after that. So there was no such law that you had to clearly, it was implied that you had to explain. There are also laws related to the fact that you can't wiretap Congress, but that's a different story. In general, it's a clear violation. I don't know if it's a violation of the letter or the spirit of the law, but it's a violation of something, but definitely a violation. I suspect that since they're discussing this so thoroughly at the hearings, it means it's a violation of the letter of the law, which means you can take it to court. But I think that's exactly what he's aiming for. So Issa, he's my neighbor from California. He lives not far from me. Now listen to how another nail is being driven into Smith's case.
In line with department policy, the law, and the appropriate rights. Mr. Chairman, what's most notable today is that we've received an admission about Article 1. The committee's time has expired by 34 seconds. That's more than 5 minutes. What's the time? Does the gentleman from California have the time? But his time has expired. I will briefly address the chairman. We have evidence that the representative of Article 1, on behalf of the president, concealed Article 3. Mr. Chairman, I request unanimous consent and leave now, expressing my disgust toward this witness.
We now have, said Issa, from the mouth of the person being questioned, evidence of a violation of the law. Issa has completed his task, and now the questioning can be handed over to the next investigator.
Mr. Smith, in January of 23, you requested call records from then-Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Yes, sir, we did. Yes, you did. The subpoena covered November 2020 to January 2021, correct? Sorry, sir, could you repeat that? We won't take that long. The subpoena covered November 2020 to January 2021. How many days after Kevin McCarthy was sworn in as Speaker did you request his records? I don't remember, but those two things were not related to each other. Just 16 days after he became the top House Republican, you subpoenaed his call records. Do you agree this could be seen as violating the speech or debate clause? I don't think so. To clarify, were you collecting call records for months? Phone records about the Republican Speaker of the House, the opposition leader, right after he took office as Speaker, and right during an important vote. This appears to blatantly violate the freedom of speech and debate clause, and I believe most people would agree. Speaker McCarthy had no protection, did he? Since you issued a non-disclosure order ensuring that neither he nor any of the American people knew about these subpoenas, these are call records, subpoenas for billing without content. We obtained non-disclosure orders for these subpoenas. You did that, and I'll ask you, Mayor Mr. Smith, when did you receive those non-disclosure orders? Was Speaker McCarthy in flight? The non-disclosure order was based on concerns about whether Speaker McCarthy was under threat, which he was not. P.
Remember, I told you they asked the judge to keep surveillance on a certain McCarthy, but which McCarthy is that? Do you know how many McCartys there are in America? Well, not a million, but there are a lot. Yes, based on the fact that if this person finds out he's being watched, if he finds out, he might run abroad and disappear. So if the Speaker of Congress finds out, he will run away and hide. They completely forgot that this McCarty is not just some McCarty from around the corner, a shop owner, but the Speaker of Congress. They just forgot out of forgetfulness. And so, as they would say, everyone said yes, but about the senators too, well, they completely forgot to mention that they are senators. Do you think a judge, even a liberal one, would have given them the right to surveil the third-ranking official in the United States and a dozen senators, knowing who we're talking about?
He wasn't that. Then why did your non-disclosure order call him a flight risk? The court states there's enough reason to believe disclosure may cause someone to flee prosecution, sir. When receiving a non-disclosure court order, the risks are not necessarily related to that. Do you think the Speaker of the House is a risk? Yes, answer the question. No, it's my time. Do you think the Speaker of the House is a flight risk? Do you think he'll leave the country? No, I was trying to explain.
That, once again, the Democrats are trying to interrupt, but they're not succeeding.
The risks are not necessarily related to the subscriber who uses this phone. There are risks to the investigation itself.
All right, I think that when you use this, it was clearly referring to Speaker McCarthy, and you used obviously false information to get a non-disclosure order to hide from Speaker McCarthy and from the American people.
Caught in another lie. This jurisprudence is a remarkably interesting thing. If I had known, yes, I would have followed in my grandfather's footsteps, who tried to persuade me a little in this direction. In the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, everything was dishonest and done by command. Of course, it was impossible to see such theater there, so I went into theater directing.
In May 2023, you also subpoenaed call records for 9 United States senators and another representative, correct?
In May 23, we issued...
You did that, and there were non-disclosure orders for those subpoenas, right?
Correct, per department policy and law.
Look how beautifully Smith is being cornered. That's why he writes something and then goes silent. He's just stalling for time because each member of Congress is given 5 minutes, well, exactly 5 minutes by the clock. And if he answers quickly, they'll ask him a lot of uncomfortable questions. That's why Smith keeps trying to ramble, stall, stay silent, write, do anything at all just to throw off the people asking questions, but it doesn't work.
He participated in a criminal plot to overturn the 2020 election results and block the lawful transfer of power. However, a few weeks ago in Georgia, representatives of the Fulton County Election Commission stated that 315,000 ballots were certified without the required signatures on the poll worker tape, even though these signatures were required by Georgia law.
If they hadn't counted them, Georgia could have turned red, and I'm sure similar schemes happened in many other states. You were illegally appointed as a special prosecutor.
I really hope you gentlemen are interested because I'm just fascinated. How all of this works like an orchestra where every instrument has its own part written out and they all come together into a harmonious symphony. I don't know, maybe that's a cliche, but I'm saying a harmonious opus, let's put it that way. Now the attack is going the other way. If you noticed, the representative from Alabama, clearly a former prosecutor, very gently started to find out how Smith could claim to the whole country that he had indisputable evidence that the president tried to deceive the people, that the elections were unfair, but at the same time, supposedly Trump knew there were no violations and that the elections were fair. Just so you understand, 2 weeks ago, as the representative from Alabama said, we learned that in Fulton County, Georgia, more than 315,000 ballots were found, more than 315,000 ballots without signatures. If we had been allowed to conduct an audit back then the state of Georgia, well, we would have found out that it didn't choose Biden. But Trump, and maybe the same thing happened in other states, only it wasn't discovered. And that's called election fraud. Only not by Trump, but by the Democrats, which means Biden was not the elected president. He was a usurper. He usurped. Maybe he didn't even know about it himself. I mean, maybe he really didn't know, because no one told him anything. And you, Vasha Smith, claim that you still have all the evidence that Trump lost.
Since you were not confirmed by the advice and consent of the Senate, and as stated in the Appointments Clause, you also brought charges against the most formidable political opponent of then-President Biden. The candidate was President Trump, and you issued a gag order for President Trump during the 2024 election cycle. This represented a serious violation of President Trump's First Amendment rights and complaint.
A weak attempt to censor the leading political candidate. Such actions
Were nothing else. As appropriate?
to be continued.
This whole speech was made just to say two words: election interference. Actually, counting E makes three words. So this is another charge that Smith will be tried for, and I hope convicted, so that those who follow in his footsteps, and there will definitely be such people. Yes, they knew that if it was Obama, they could go to prison for many, many years.
For obtaining recordings of phone conversations, call details of members of Congress. And there are a couple of things I want to highlight. There is legal risk in that first area. So, they acknowledge certain concerns and send this copy to Jack Smith's team. And then, as Mr. Gill noted, case law is clear that the legislator can intervene and prevent such use. So the risk is real, but here's the thing. Actually, there was no risk at all. We wouldn't have known because they kept it from us, getting a gag order from the judge to ensure we didn't find out. And look at the last sentence, None of the members listed below will be secretly charged, as we aren't charging them. They haven't done anything wrong. And legal, so the risk of prosecution should be minimal. They won't be charged. We won't prosecute them. The risk of prosecution is minimal because, honestly, it doesn't exist because they won't find out, and we'll make sure they don't find out because we won't even tell the judge who we're getting restraining orders against. And yet Mr. Smith believed that this was completely normal. It was quite acceptable. It was in the letter and spirit of the Constitution. I find it very hard to believe. And you know why? You know why this is? Why everyone knows it's wrong? Because the Department of Justice's Office of Integrity has now changed its policy. You can't do that anymore. They've changed their policy, but Jack Smith was allowed to do it. We need to get Trump, the president. That was the point, as the gentleman from Alabama said. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I yield back. Nice job, Jim. You caught it well. The Justice Department quickly at the end of Biden's administration started cleaning up and fixing the rules because the rules were unethical and unconstitutional. And they all knew this, including Smith. Of course, he may be anything, but he doesn't really know his job well. From my point of view, he's not a smart person based on how he presents himself and how he responds to things that are unexpected for him. But he, has everything prepared, knows everything. Just like an honor student, he's an honor student, that kind of nasty honor student in school. And you don't have to tell the judge who they're asking to eavesdrop on. That's not important. But they quickly changed that when Trump won the election. I can imagine how scared they all got, including Mr. Smith.
The Washington Post called you out. The Washington Post called you to account. They called you to account, sir. For violating the First Amendment, you tried to criminalize political speech, impose illegal gag orders on presidential candidates, and surveil members of Congress. From the Republican Party, violating the speech or debate clause, including the current House Speaker. Mr. Smith, you handled documents carelessly, pressured defense attorneys, amassed and dumped a whole pile of so-called evidence right before the election. And you did it to influence the voters. That's why you did it, and don't get me started. Proto-trade at Mar-a-Lago, or your unconstitutional appointment, which a federal judge in Florida rightly overturned. That was a very bad day for you. It wasn't about upholding the law, Mr. Smith. It was about taking down President Trump and anyone close to him. You even tried to push a politically motivated final report after your cases fell apart, including the Presidential Transition Act and basic fairness. But here's the good news, America, here's the good news. The American people understood everything perfectly. They rejected your witch hunt, sir, loud and clear. In November, by giving President Trump a convincing victory, the voters spoke clearly and unequivocally. They wanted to put an end to turning our justice system into a weapon. In your opening statement, you mentioned evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. Mr. Smith, I will provide you with irrefutable evidence. Donald Trump's victory in the popular vote by more than 2 million votes, the Electoral College, which he won by a margin of 85 votes, as well as every single swing state. Now, sir.
This proves the Democratic Party failed to stop Trump. We, ladies and gentlemen, are incredibly lucky that we broke them, as they say in America, broke their machine. The machine meaning, of course, their political machine. Yes, we were lucky that Trump turned out to be a 100-stranded, not 3, not 4, but a 100-stranded person. We were lucky that, after spending 4 years out of the White House, he gathered real direct followers, assembled a team, wrote a 4-year plan, and prepared the steps needed to make that plan happen. I hope that Trump and his people have figured out how to make sure that after the 2028 election, what happened after Trump's first term and after Ronald Reagan left doesn't happen again. By the way, I mean a complete return to collectivism, socialism, even Marxism, which is mixed with fascism, because the conditions that lead to the growth of socialism among educated youth were not changed. I hope that Miller and Latnick are building the foundation of a society that will remain after Trump, that Trump, Rubio, and others are restructuring the way the world interacts so that there is no return to globalism or to a system with a single policeman on the planet. Let's say, gentlemen, we have advanced in creating weapons, in physical sciences, and we can blow up the planet. We are still in the Stone Age. When it comes to resolving conflicts, it's usually a stone that the offended party tries to hit the head of the one they consider the offender. Trump was probably the first practitioner among theorists I knew. Well, there were Mises, Hayek, Ayn Rand, especially Andre Galambos, the great American philosopher of the late 20th century. Well, Thomas Paine, but who actually built the models? But Trump is the first one who is trying to create conditions for the human race not to perish by its own hands, not to destroy itself. When someone gets offended, it's enough to blow up the planet. Today, something is happening that, in terms of impact, is similar. I don't know, I'm about to say something that will probably upset a few people, similar to Moses coming down from Sinai with the tablets. I don't think that in the 1500 years since then, anything as epical has happened as what's happening today. I know you think I'm crazy right now, or maybe you believe I've always been, so I couldn't have just lost my mind today. But please remember that you can only see the big picture from a distance. And what Donald J. Trump is trying to do isn't just something small, it's something huge. That's why we don't see what's happening. If you're two-dimensional, you can't see the third dimension. The peoples of the North don't see colors in them, but they have 16 words. For different states of snow, we just say snow or wet snow or dry snow, but they have 16 words that describe different states of snow. They can't see colors like red or green. My close friend, the wonderful Georgian artist Avtandil Makarabidze, gave me a painting. On it, on a red background, is the Red Knight. Daria, Avtandil proudly said, "There are 16 shades of red here." Well, naturally, I smiled, nodded my head, and saw two colors, one darker and one lighter. Well, 2 or 3 years passed, and I had another artist, this time from Ukraine, Dima Danish, a master of color. He saw this work by Avtandil, stared at it, studied it for a long time, then clicked his tongue and said, 12 shades of red. I came closer. I swear there were 2 shades of red, one darker, one lighter. And suddenly I realized I just can't see them. They're there. I just can't see them. My eyes aren't as sensitive as theirs. They can see 12 or 16. Yes, but I can't. Gentlemen, you just don't see what Trump is building. He paints his picture with 16 shades of red. I see about half, while others just see a black field with no light. And I'm sure that when someone who sees maybe a small part of this magnificent Trump building says it's genius, they see that there's nothing there, and they think that we're either liars or insane. We always had dogs in our house, so it's about them. I always knew in advance who was coming up to our house. Not just that someone was coming, but exactly who it was. Well, let's say, I don't know, maybe 10, 100 meters, 300 meters, maybe 500 meters away. Suppose a friend of mine who has passed away was coming to our house. Yakov Sklyansky. How did I know? Because we had a firehouse dog, a Dalmatian back then. Why a firehouse dog? Because that's probably the only, let's say, type or breed of dog that can be trained to go into a burning building. So she would lie down by the door and start to smile. She smiled in a fantastic way, of course, but that's not the point. I knew for sure Yakov Sklyansky was coming. It always worked, yes? When my wife drives up to the house with groceries, it takes her about 5 minutes by car. 5 minutes because it's quite far to our entrance. So all the dogs start drooling, all the dogs start lying down in front of the door. They start drooling, meaning they hear, they sense it. I don't know, she's not even at the gate yet. She's still on her way. Try explaining to someone who can't hear that a car is making noise 500 meters away. Or maybe it's just thoughts. The image of the owner with groceries pops into the minds of all the dogs, and we had a lot of them. Gentlemen, if you don't see, don't feel. If you can't put the whole picture together from the signs, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means you don't hear it, don't see it, don't feel it, don't understand it. We were lucky Trump came. And in our civilization, well, what we call the Judeo-Christian civilization, a chance has appeared. That's us, gentlemen. We invented airplanes and learned how to perform heart surgeries. We brought morality into a world of animal instincts. We built quadriles and created organs. We dreamed of the stars and discovered the cause of the plague. Somehow we came up with the idea that the world originated from an explosion at a single point. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but somehow we calculated it. So personally, it was painful for me to see how we, our culture, our civilization, well, we were practically committing suicide as a society, and then Trump appeared, and now there's a chance. And don't pay attention to the little dogs barking when they can't stop our moving caravan. In general, anything new, especially something radically new, causes rejection in most people. And it doesn't matter whether you studied in school for 20 years or only finished 2 grades of a parish school, even if it was a circus parish school. You either have the ability to accept new things or you don't. By the way, the simpler something is, the fewer people understand it. It's an insanely strange concept, I know. It sounds weird, but how many people 400 years ago understood that the earth doesn't stand on 4 elephants or whales or turtles? And how many understood that throwing girls overboard from ships probably wouldn't calm the sea? And how long ago did you realize that doctors should wash their hands when moving from one patient to another? And how many today understand that it's impossible for everyone to live a wonderful life by robbing and dividing the property of those who earned it or inherited it from their parents? And how many understand that the bigger the government, the less freedom a person has, the less freedom a person has, the worse he works, and the worse he works, the harder his life becomes? How many today understand that the only way to overcome poverty and hunger is to produce more? Not to take away, not to divide, not to steal, but to produce more. And in order to produce more, you need to know more. Let me answer. About as many people as there were 400 years ago who believed that by burning women and children they could stop the bubonic plague. Does Trump know this or not? It's a gift from above. It's our chance. Something that probably comes only once in many generations. This is today's Thomas Paine, but Paine laid the foundation, and Trump is building what Paine and Gallambo created in theory. And it's not less or more, it's different. They created it in theory. And whether he knows the theory or not, whether he read them or not, Paine, I think, read Gallambo, I don't know. But nevertheless, he is the first to start building it, and that's priceless. And the cherry on top. Yesterday, Trump filed a lawsuit, well, as a citizen and a businessman and as a president, against Chase Manhattan Bank. He demanded a small amount from them as compensation for damages. Let me explain what kind of damages. Well, the amount is, so to speak, a trifle. $5 billion. For what? For the fact that in the midst of the persecution of Trump, the courts were hounding him. The bank closed the accounts of Trump himself and his companies without any warning. This was a severe blow to Trump's businesses. His entire business is built on constant, both short-term and long-term loans, earning profits with financial institutions, with financial flows, especially at that moment when the Democrats came up with a move that was almost fatal for Trump. Chase Manhattan gladly picked up on this. After Trump came to power, he issued a presidential order prohibiting banks from terminating financial services in the future without prior notice, especially if it happens on political or religious grounds. The Democrats created an atmosphere of harassment, and several banks began to stop serving Republican and Christian organizations. Naturally, the president of Chase Manhattan Bank claims that they had completely different motives, but so far he hasn't explained what those motives were for cutting off Trump and his companies from money, financing, and loans. The Democratic Party seems to have organized a center where methods are developed to make life worse for all ideological opponents who stand in their way to power. Power is money, it's impunity, it's a sense of permissiveness. Power is intoxicating, and the lack of a moral compass leads to a situation where, in the struggle for power, all methods become permissible. Let's wish our president another $5 billion. I hope it won't bother him and he'll find a way to use them. Goodbye.